Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of CNC Basecamp. Got a project today that I hope you're going to like. It's going to be fun, I think. And it is a 10-drawer chest. And who doesn't need storage, right? Well, I think with this project, you'll find a home for parts in your workshop, for collections, for jewelry, whatever you want. So let's take a look. I'll give you the tour. This episode is sponsored by Inventables. Design it, build it, sell it. Learn more at inventables.com. As you can see, it consists primarily of one cabinet which contains the 10 drawers. That cabinet is going to be a basic plywood shell. Each drawer is exactly identical, and that makes this project a lot easier and makes it well suited for a CNC production machine. One thing I really like about the drawers, let me go ahead and pull one up here. They're very simple, very direct, and they're meant to be taken out and carried somewhere. So we're going to take some care to make the back of the drawer and the sides clean, smooth, and nice so that when you take it out of the cabinet, it'll look good. One thing I'm excited about is custom hardware. I don't know about you, but it's so easy to fall into the habit of going to any of the catalog retailers and just buying the hardware that's available. Well, we have a CNC machine. What are we doing? Let's make some custom hardware. So this handle that you see here, we're going to make that. And I think that's going to be a lot of fun, and it'll make for a really custom job. Going back to our overview, you'll see that there are 4 legs that are applied to our plywood carcass. And that is a great way to impart a look and to elevate the cabinet and give it a little bit of style. There's also matching corbels and a top that overhangs. If you like to change the look of the cabinet, it's pretty easy to do by just changing the shape of the legs. You can change the corbels or remove them and work with the top a little bit. So work with the basic cabinet and then add and subtract details as you like. Have some fun, play with it. The first thing that we need to do is we're going to start with this cabinet. And the first parts that we're going to make are the sides of the cabinet. The 2 sides are mirror images of each other, and they're going to have a slot for this back. They're going to have mortises for tenons that extend from the top and the bottom of the cabinet, and they're going to have slots on the interior for small strips of wood on which the drawers will slide. And so the sides have a little bit of busyness to them, but the CNC machine doesn't care. It's just going to go ahead and do a great job for us. So let me get our machine set up and we'll get busy and cut the sides. All right, well, I'm all set up to cut the sides for our cabinet. I've got a 1/4 inch straight bit in the machine right now. And a straight bit is what I want because that's going to give good results, not only in cutting the grooves to the back and for those supports for the drawers, but in my final perimeter cut. So I think I'm good to go. I'm going to turn the vacuum on. We'll get this thing running. Well, next up, we need to make the top and the bottom of our cabinet. So I've got the same straight bit, which will give us great results in this 3/4 inch plywood. What's going to happen is the bit's going to cut a long pocket cut on either end of these parts to help create the step for the tenons. Then it's going to cut the overall outline. One thing you'll notice when we go to assemble is that rather than fight the fillets that occur naturally when using a CNC router, is that I'm going to go ahead and just live with it, and I've made my mortises a little bit wider than I otherwise would, so that all the fillets that we're going to have are just going to bypass each other and they won't matter. Well, we've completed the sides of our cabinet. We've completed the top and the bottom. I went ahead and cut the 1/4 inch back on my table saw. You know, it's always kind of a dilemma. How much do I do using my CNC machine and how much do I do using my conventional shop tools? I think a lot of us are woodworkers first who've come into CNC work later. And we already have a big shop and we already have the primary tools. But I think it's really fun to think about, what if I'm starting up my shop and this is my primary tool, and then I'm adding power hand tools to that and other things. So I'm trying to do as much as I can with my CNC because it's such a fun challenge to think about, how do I do joinery? How do I create a workflow with this machine first? Because this machine is so versatile and can do so many different things. Well, as long as I have my straight bed in the machine, I'd like to continue cutting plywood. So what we're going to do now is move on to the drawers. For this sheet of plywood, I have laid out the sides of my drawers, and there's 10 drawers, there's 20 sides. So there's going to be a bit of work to do there. When we're done with that, I'll flip a new piece of plywood on the table here, and we'll go ahead and cut the backs of the drawers. And from there, we'll be done with the plywood, with the exception of the drawer bottoms, and we'll start moving on to solid wood. Well, I finished out all the parts for the drawers with the exception of the bottoms. Now the plywood bottoms, I'm just going to cut those out on the table saw since it'll be faster and more convenient. Next up, I'm going to cut the legs out and the corbels, then we'll move on to the top. Now I have switched bits since we're cutting solid wood now. With the plywood, I was cutting using a straight bit. Now I'm using a 1/4 inch upcut spiral. So let's go ahead and get started and get the legs and the corbels cut. One of the great features of our project today is that it features custom-made poles. You know, when designing furniture, it's so easy just to go to the catalogs or on the web and just pick to the same old favorites you always use. But one of the great things that we can do to up our game in making furniture is to really look at the hardware we choose. Your CNC machine can help you make all sorts of hardware, some in metal, some in wood. For our project, we're making wooden poles, and it's really pretty easy. What we're going to do is cut out the silhouette of one of these wooden poles, then I'll take it to the router table and gently ease all the surfaces. Using a jig later, I'll drill out the holes for the screws to enter into it. It's easy to do. We're going to make 10 of them. They'll all look exactly the same, and it's really going to make our furniture piece look great. Well, it's exciting to see all the parts we've been cutting come together and our furniture project begin to appear. So let me bring you up to date on what I've been doing with the carcass. Of course, I glued together the sides, the top, and the bottom. A couple details though. One is along these outside edges, I cut a shallow rabbet, 1/16 by 1/2 inch, and I glued in a small strip of cherry so that we have a more finished edge right here. And solid wood doesn't go all the way to the inner edge of our plywood because of these slides that we've put in for the drawers to run on. It was just easier to stop them at 1/2 inch. Now, speaking of another addition, these are 1 inch by 1/4 slides for our drawers to ride on. Rather than going all solid throughout, I decided to keep them slim and narrow. A couple advantages. One, of course, it saves a little bit of plywood. Two, there's lots of room in here for me to get a drill when it comes time to put the legs on or attach the top. I did, however, decide to put a full width panel right here in the center, and the reason for that is it's going to help keep these sides straight in case they have a tendency to bow. Another little item that I've done is that I've pre-drilled holes for the legs and the top. There's also a series of holes drilled through this top, which will hold our solid wood top on. And of course, they're drilled a little bit oversized so that everything can move a little bit with wood movement. So what next? The next thing I need to do is that I have 2 little trim strips here. one which will go at the bottom of our cabinet and one up at the top. And the reason for these is that they're going to mirror the shape of the fronts of our drawers. And that way we get a seamless form from top to bottom of our cabinet. One hallmark about this project is a lot of drawers, 10 of them actually. So it's a good thing we used our CNC router to create uniform parts that are going to go together easily. So let's take a look at each drawer. Of course, we have a face, and the face has pockets routed on either end to accept the sides. It's a very simple, very straightforward joinery method for a light-duty drawer. We also have a plow here to accept a 1/4-inch bottom. Our sides and our back are joined with a simple tongue and groove. One little detail that I need to do while I'm making the drawer is that I will need to route a little bit of a radius on the top of each of these sides so that it will fit tightly against the rounded radius of the top of that mortise. I'm going to do just a little bit on each side, and then after everything's glued up, after everything's assembled, I'll come back in and I'm going to route all the way around the inside and the outside of our drawer and the back corners. And the reason I'm doing that is I anticipate people taking these drawers out and carrying them to a different location. So I want it to be a good tactile feel, no sharp edges. And that's why I want rounded edges all along the sides and back of our drawer. But to start with, we'll just do enough for our glue up. So I'm going to go ahead now and do the routing and route the round over on the top 2 edges of my sides and also a little bit on the lower outside edge. All right, with the sides routed, let's go ahead and spread a little glue and get started. One thing I'll point out is that this back is not as tall as the sides, because what I want to be able to do is take my bottom and slip it in at this point in my glue up. It's just a lot easier to slide the drawer in at this point, or to slide the drawer bottom in. Now with everything in place, I'm going to make absolutely sure that the sides are drawn completely into that joint on the front. The first thing I'm going to do is put a clamp on it and really pull the sides into the drawer front. And the most important thing we can do when making drawers, make sure they're square. All right, with my drawer square, my next step is I'm going to nail off the bottom back edge of the drawer bottom. So I'm going to flip my drawer over. And take a nailer. There we go. Now I can set my drawer aside, let it dry, we'll come back and we'll route and we'll attach the handle. Well, my drawer's out of the clamps and I'm just doing a little bit of leveling of the surfaces here. The next step is I'm going to take the router, which has an 1/8-inch roundover bed in it, and I'll go ahead and ease off all these edges so my drawer has a good feel to it. You know, rounding the edges of drawer sides is a great detail even if you're using standard slides. A bevel, a cove, a roundover, it really helps to finish off that drawer. Now the last step is to go ahead and put the handle on. Now, if you remember, we made these pretty handles on the CNC machine. And that's really one of the big pluses of having a CNC machine is you can do things like this. 10 handles, all the same. In drilling the holes in the face of the drawers, I did that on the drill press and I set up a stop so they would be uniform. And I've drilled the holes a little bit oversized because one thing I don't want to do is stress my handle unnecessarily. So I've got the proper pilot hole size drilled in the handle, oversized in the drawer face. One thing I did come across when I was drilling the pilot holes in the handle was how do I hold the handle on the drill press table because it keeps wanting to rock around. So what I did was I just took one of the offcuts from our CNC machine and cut it in half, and that made a perfect cradle. And the ends actually acted as a stop. So I was able to clamp this to the fence of my drill press and make perfect holes exactly centered with the holes in the drawer face. When you use wood handles like this, one thing that's important is that the screw length should come up very close to the surface of the handle. We don't want it for the screw to only bite into this nub here because that's a relatively weak portion of the handle. We want the screw to go all the way up into the bow of the handle. And there is the last of our drawers. So let's get the carcass back here and put the legs and the top on, and we'll be ready to wrap this project up. Hey, it's time to put the legs on. I've already got my holes pre-drilled on the side, and I'm going to go ahead and use screws plus glue. So I'm just going to hold this on temporarily with a clamp until I can get my screws in. All right, so I'm positioning the leg for there to be about a 1/8 inch reveal between the face of the leg and this edge of the cabinet, so about an 1/8 inch down. Another thing I'll point out is when we made the legs, rather than use a T-bone or a dog bone in this area to deal with the fillet that the router bit left, what I've done is just took a block plane and I've eased to the edge of the bottom of our cabinet. It's soft now, it's not going to catch anything. It looks fine, it's at the bottom of the cabinet, and it's a simple way of dealing with the inevitable filleting that we have when we machine with the CNC machine. The bottom leg is flush with the back of the cabinet, so I'm just going to let the bottom leg reference off of my bench top. All right, and there's our first pair of legs, and so on to the next side. The top we cut out with our CNC machine, then received a 3/16 round over top and bottom with a handheld router. So I've got the top marked side to side for its location, and I'm just going to put a couple clamps on to hold it in position while I put the screws in. There are 6 screw holes, 3 up top, 3 below, to hold the top on. These holes are all oversized to allow for movement. So as with the legs, I'm going to drill a pilot hole first and then sink the screws in. Well, that completes the top. The next thing we're going to do is add the corbels, a nice decorative detail which fit underneath the top. The corbels also received a 3/16 round over, just as we added to the top. And the corbels are going to be in the same position as the legs. So this front corbel will be 1/8 of an inch down from the edge, and the lower corbel will reference off the bench top, so it'll be flush with the back. To mount these corbels, I'm simply going to add a little bit of glue, and then I'm going to fire about 2 pin nails to hold them in place until the glue sets. And there we go. I think we're done with the carcass of our cabinet now. Well, that completes our cabinet build. I'm really excited about a project like this because it really shows off what a CNC machine can do. All those guides had to be precisely laid out. All those drawer sides, all those drawer backs, all those drawer fronts. And you know, They all fit, they all worked, they all came together nicely because of the accuracy and the repeatability that my CNC machine offers. Another great feature of the CNC machine that we were using here is the ability to make our own handles. That's really a nice feature and a nice plus for a project like this. Now, as far as finishing, I'm going to be going over this project, carefully sanding it, and really bringing out the luster of the cherry. Then I'm going to apply a coat of oil and a couple of coats of lacquer. But there's a lot of different ways that you could finish it. One thing I thought about is, what if the top, the corbels, the legs, and the handles were all stained much darker? Maybe you'd use more of a Java stain on those and a cherry stain with sort of an orange underpinning to it. That would be a great contrast and I think really look sharp. Of course, you could also just change the species of wood. What if you were to use bright maple and then walnut for an accent wood? That'd look great too. One thing to think about with a project like this is it really amounts to a carcass, the drawers, and then all the appendages, the top, the legs, the handles. You can easily change this design to suit your needs. So if you're needing a parts cabinet for your shop, well, how about some straight angular legs? Maybe skip the corbels, maybe not. How about some little cutouts on the top for parts as you're sorting them? And maybe a handle that includes a little placard that you can put a label in. There's all sorts of things you can do to completely change the look. So if you're looking for a parts cabinet, a collector's cabinet, a crafts cabinet, this project is a great way to start. Now, as always, we're going to have all you need online for you to download. There'll be a PDF set of plans with most of the dimensions. There'll also be DXF files of all the parts for you to drop into your CNC program. So it's all there for you. Well, thank you very much for joining me today on today's build, and I hope to see you next month on CNC Basecamp. This episode is sponsored by Inventables. Design it, build it, sell it. Learn more at inventables.com.